My first guest on the Rattlesnake podcast is none other than Mark Wooding from the After School YouTube channel. Now, for those of you who have been living under a rock for the last few years, Mark is an incredibly talented artist that infuses art with ideas.
I will shake it off and then just beat the devil out of it.
And on the ideas front, he has worked with some of the absolute best, including Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein. Mark also recently started his own podcast called Before School. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, I'll leave the links in the bio. Let's get into it. Wooding, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Jake, Rattlesnake. What's up, man?
How did you first learn about my channel, by the way? Because you reached out to me and I thought that was super cool because I've been watching you for years.
Well, you know how YouTube kind of sends you down these rabbit holes of, it kind of politicizes you a little bit. So you click on one Jordan Peterson video and all of a sudden you're getting Ben Shapiro videos, and then suddenly your video popped up. And I dip my toes into the political realm sometimes, but I for whatever reason clicked on one of your videos one day. They really stand out. And it was entertaining, but really educational as well. I think you do an awesome job of merging entertainment and excitement with, like, I walk away from your videos and I'm like, I actually learned quite a bit from that.
That's cool, man. That's a big compliment. I mean, I've been watching yours for years, like I said, and I think the first one that really hit me was your Nikola Tesla video, because I had no idea about that. And I had no idea that Tesla was this big genius. And then talking about sending you down rabbit holes, like the whole Tesla theory of why the pyramids were built it's a new rabbit hole. And I can see by your videos as well that you're super into like Randall Carlson and sacred geometry and all of those topics as well, which is just that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that Randall Carlson, all that, the sacred geometry and those mysteries, they really sent me on probably the deepest rabbit hole I've been on. I've been on 4 or 5 trips out in the field with Randall Carlson, looking at geology all around America, and eventually I went to Egypt as well, because I'm kind of like you. I want to go to these places firsthand and explore these mysteries, and kind of just the more you explore the outer world, the more you kind of start to figure out your inner world, even though you'll never figure it out fully, but you kind of want to just keep pulling that thread, and that's the adventure of life.
Wow, dude, I definitely can't move past that. So you went on trips with Randall Carlson. When you say trips, do you mean mushroom trips or do you mean actual trips out to the field? You weren't tripping while you were on the trips, were you?
No, I wish. But these were actual geology trips. So I first discovered Randall Carlson through the Joe Rogan podcast. I think it was episode 606, where he talked. I probably watched it like 5 times. Where he talked about the end of the last ice age and climate change, but not in the way that we think of it. We look at climate change kind of in the last like 200 years since we've been really measuring the temperature. But what Randall Carlson does is he looks at it over hundreds of thousands of years, deep into the ice age. And what you'll find is that in the last 12,000 years, we've been living in an extremely stable state of temperature. And if you go beyond this veil of the Younger Dryas is when it's the separation between the Ice Age and our current era. Mm-hmm. And in the Ice Age, the temperature was fluctuating like crazy. I mean, if you look at these ice core samples that they take out, where you can see the temperature each year, insane fluctuations. So this blew my mind, because I thought we were living in catastrophic climate change times. And I wanted to go and check out some of these sites where you can see scars on the earth. There's literally like giant scars on the earth from these massive catastrophes. And one of the things Randall Carlson always teaches about is that we have this notion that all change happens 1 grain of sand and 1 drop of water at a time. And that's just not true. When you go stand on the Grand Canyon, it's so clear that something huge happened here. And we have no idea. I mean, some of these things happen in a day, and they drastically change the earth in thousands of ways.
Dude, it's wild when you think about it. And what of the trips that you've done? You said, was Egypt one of those 4?
So Randall Carlson didn't go on the Egypt trip, but that was affiliated with like everybody that goes on his trips, we all went to Egypt with do you know the channel Uncharted X?
Yeah, of course. Yep.
It's run by a guy named Ben.
Yep.
So
Yep. He was on
he
Rogan
runs those
recently.
trips.
Yep.
Yep. He runs that trip. It's a really awesome trip. It's a bit expensive, but you get special access to all these sites that are not open to the public. So we got to go inside the Great Pyramid in the middle of the night and
No
go to the
way.
King's Chamber, Queen's Chamber, go into the subterranean area. And some of these areas are not open to the public. Really amazing stuff.
So what's it like in there? I mean, it feels like when I think about that, when I think about going into the chambers of the pyramids, I can just like I'm thinking about the mummy. I'm thinking about like the it must be haunting and spooky and like you know that where the place where you're standing is one of the biggest mysteries in history and throughout ancient history. So what's it like standing in there?
Um, Well, from the first time, I've only been there once, but it's just like it's overwhelming. So you really can only just sit back and just be in awe and wonder like, why did they build like you have so many questions that you almost just you're just amazed.
Hmm.
And a lot of the people that had been there multiple times were like taking measurements and they had all these little tools and they were weighing things and checking the air humidity and they were trying to figure out what kind of rock everything was. And I almost like was just trying to take it all in. But there's quite a few mysteries there, and I definitely walked away with more questions than answers.
Yeah, right. And so Randall Carlson, I've seen him do on Rogan. He had that episode where he broke down. I think it was called the Channel Scablands in the USA, and you can literally see the scars on the earth of where they. The theory is that there was a massive, like a catastrophic event, a cataclysm. Like I think it was that like an asteroid hit the earth and melted the ice caps, and then there was just this force of nature that ripped through the Channel Scablands. And when he describes it, you're picturing in your head like just the weight of the world and just rocks and debris and water and everything just ripping through the land and creating these like scars in it. It's wild to think about. Have you been to the Scablands?
Yep, many times. And Randall does about 2 trips a year to the Scablands, and I've been on one of them. I hope to go on another one with him. But anybody can go on those trips. They're open to anybody. And that one's a awesome trip because you really the landscape, it doesn't have any vegetation on it really. So you really can stand on these bluffs and see, wow, okay, this really did happen. And there's certain features of the land that look kind of like a beach where you'll see when a wave comes in and out, you'll see those ripples. You know how the sand makes those little ripples?
Yep.
Now times that by like a million. And you'll be standing on a bluff and you'll see those ripples. And those ripples will be like 50 to 100 feet high. And you clearly see this is a water feature of water rushing through this area and scraping away things. One of the cool features is there's these giant boulders that have been stripped from the mountains about 100 miles away. And those boulders got ripped up by giant icebergs the size of oil tankers and taken to these fields. And then the ice settles and melts. And so you just have these giant rocks the size of a 3-story house. And we'll go to these farms, and the farmers, they have no idea why this rock is there. We'll talk to the farmer, and he's like, this thing is just in the way of my tractor. And we're like, we'll tell him the story, and he'll have a completely different vision of what that rock means now. But it's a pretty cool trip, and it blew my mind for sure.
Yeah, dude. It's one of those topics, I think, and I have a feeling that you and I are on a similar trajectory in the way that we've sort of learnt things and come about these topics. And I think that trajectory's name is Joe Rogan. Like Rogan got me. I got introduced to Jordan Peterson from Joe Rogan. I got introduced to Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock from Joe Rogan. And it's funny how much of an impact that podcast has had on culture, because he's brought to light a lot of these super interesting people who have these super interesting worldviews and perspectives and ranges of knowledge. And I feel like whenever you talk to someone who has really been into Rogan over the years, you kind of just know, because they can have a bit of a conversation about all of these different topics. So did you learn about these guys purely from Rogan?
Yeah, Rogan has been a huge shift in consciousness for me, and I think globally. Just you talk to people in everyday life, and if they watch Joe Rogan, you can almost connect with them on so many different topics: ancient civilizations, psychedelics, MMA, fitness, comedy, free speech, certain aspects of politics, And I think it's just people who are curious and free thinkers. And what Joe Rogan has done is he'll probably downplay it, but it's pretty important. I could see you going on this podcast at some point.
Oh, I could see you going on as well, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe we'll do an episode all together one day.
Yeah,
That's the goal. I think that's like the pinnacle, isn't it?
I'm very much. I for a long time I saw myself as like more behind the scenes, and I was very hesitant to come forward and step in front of a mic or put my face on camera. But I think it's an important skill. Like you're extremely good at I just watched your China Taiwan video, and like that was so educational. I learned like more in the first 5 or 10 minutes of that video than I had, I don't know, in all of college maybe.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I guess what I try and do is like condense it, because YouTube is all about holding attention, isn't it? So I want to take all of the information and this whole complicated issue in synthesis and then pull it together. And I see it as a puzzle. I'm absolutely enthralled when I do these sorts of things, taking these big giant issues and just really condensing it and making it palatable for people who want to just learn about this and want to be able to speak about it at a cocktail party. So I find that super entertaining.
Yeah, I was just looking through your channel and I kind of click on your most recent videos and then your most popular videos. And it seems like, you can learn about human nature just by looking at what's the most popular. And we are attracted to drama and emotion and excitement. And so the videos that you had that had millions of views or went really big were very much like, this person got triggered. Check out this person that got embarrassed. But I think you do a great job of infusing education in, like, you kind of have to play the game. You have to balance it. Like, you can't just be clickbaity. Like, there are people that will go for it, but I don't think that's a long-term game. And then you don't want to make this dry. Nobody's going to watch it if you don't have any of the drama and the emotion and the excitement. So
100%,
I'm always,
man. Yeah. No, I think you've pretty much absolutely got it spot on what I'm trying to do, which is I'm happy to, be a little bit more risque, and I'm happy to be a little bit more controversial and all those sorts of things, because I genuinely think that people like will come for the drama and and whatever, but then they'll stay for what I've got to say. And then if I can have those people who come for the drama stay for the really educational stuff and eventually the podcast that I'm doing and that sort of thing, then that's a success for me. And I get a lot of people, not a lot, but I get a few people who say, oh, you're too controversial with your titles and all that sort of thing. And I definitely see where they're coming from. But like you said, you have to play the game a little bit. And that's the one thing that I kind of have to compromise on a little bit. I don't really want to be doing that forever. I'd like to get to the stage one day where I don't have to sort of do any sort of clickbaity drama sort of thumbnails, but hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, you got to play the game, and it's just a balance. Like there's certain videos that are all drama, all excitement, and I might be excited in the moment, but when I walk away from that video, I'm like, that was kind of a waste of time. I didn't get anything out of that. And then there's those videos that are very educational, and I kind of have to force myself to watch them, and it's almost a chore. But yours is that you meet that perfect X where those two lines intersect.
Oh, I appreciate that, man, because that is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep it really tasteful and educational and provide as much value, whilst at the same time trying to be entertaining as well, and trying to be funny and trying to do all that sort of stuff. But I think I'm doing okay, so I really appreciate that. And your channel's pretty similar in that regard, in the sense that you're extremely educational, but you're also got your finger on the pulse with hot topics as well, which I find. And that segues perfectly into my next question, which is like, we're at the height of the pandemic, and people are more divided than they've ever been. And there's the anti-vaxxers and the vaxxers and the lockdown people and the anti-lockdown people, and things are just crazy. And then you drop a video that's about mass formation psychosis, which is something that's an incredibly hot topic at the time. What was the thought process there? What was it like for you? And how did it feel when you were dropping that? Because I can imagine that would have been a real risk for you.
Well, that was a collaboration with Academy of Ideas, which is a philosophical YouTube channel. They're
Alain de
awesome.
Botton, right?
I'm sorry?
Is Alain de Botton, is he one of the guys who does Academy of Ideas? I think I've seen a few videos.
No, it's Mike and Matt. They're two brothers from Canada. I don't think they ever show their face, but they're really well read. They talk about a lot of the philosophers that Jordan Peterson
Yeah, I do know.
references.
I know the channel, but I must be getting it mixed up. But they do talk about a lot. They talk about people a lot, right? Philosophers and authors and
Yep. Yeah, you've probably seen some of their videos, but they did quite a few. They really went deep on mass psychosis in many of their videos, and I came to them and I was like, why don't we synthesize all of this into one master mass psychosis video? And they like that idea. The second I read that script, I knew this was going to be big. I was like, this is going to be a game changer, and you need to put everything that you have, every ounce of creativity that you have in your soul, just put it into this video. And by the end of it, I was like emotionally and physically exhausted. I put everything into that video. And I'm really proud of it. It's probably one of the proudest presentations I've put together. And it took off. And I'm glad that I stayed very neutral on it. Everybody knew what that video was about, but I didn't really take a side. The video is very careful in not saying a single politician's name. It didn't say anything about COVID or any current event. It stayed strictly on the philosophy. And we touched on examples, but from the past, like witch hunts and other totalitarian regimes from the past. And everybody could see what it was referencing. And the funny thing was everybody thought it was talking about the other side. So like conservatives thought it was talking about liberals thought it was talking about Trumpers. And it was funny to just go through the comments. You can see completely opposite reality viewpoints back to back. And that video got picked up by everybody. I know Joe Rogan watched it. I'm pretty sure Tucker Carlson checked it out because he was talking about it like a few days after.
yeah.
Alex Jones, he did a whole episode about it.
Really?
Which was, I was conflicted because I was like, this is cool that he did the video. And he literally talked about it for 3 hours and did the craziest shout out. And yeah,
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, you would be honored. I mean, and Alex Jones is one of those guys who's so divisive. And for somebody like yourself, you wouldn't necessarily be too thrilled to be associated with somebody who's like so heavily down one side. I mean, a lot of guys, I know I like a lot of the stuff that Alex Jones has done, especially him going into Bohemian Grove and breaking into there and seeing the big owl ceremony. That was cool. He's been apparently he's right about turning the frogs gay. RFK just went on Rogan and said how they're turning the frogs. I think they're making the frogs transgender or something like that. But anyway,
I had a whole video on that earlier this year.
Oh, really? I didn't see that one.
Frogs. It was with Dr. Shauna Swan. And It was about chemicals called phthalates that are in plastics that disrupt our endocrine systems. And especially it disrupts your development when you're a baby in the womb. You need the delivery of testosterone because we all start off as a female fetus. And the delivery of testosterone is what masculinizes a baby. And if you don't get the right delivery in the womb, you will be unmasculinized forever. Undermasculinized, that's what she calls it. And there's a whole section in that video, about 10-minute section, where we go into the actual scientific studies of those pesticides on the frogs and other species as well. And then, you can take it from there and say, okay, well, what if you spray those chemicals on humans? And then that's where Alex Jones kind of picked it up from there. So it is real science. And people try to say it's a conspiracy theory, but that is actually happening. And it could be one explanation.
Oh, absolutely. And are you seeing on Twitter recently? I'm not sure how much on you go on Twitter, but Joe Rogan's arguing with a guy called Peter Hotep, who's I think he's a immunologist or something like that, and he's offered him $100,000 to do a live debate with him and RFK because he's saying that RFK is spreading a bunch of misinformation. Have you seen that?
Is that Peter Hotez?
Hotez, that might be the
Is
one.
that he was the guy that's kind of overweight that's giving out health advice
Yeah,
and pushing the vaccine, and Joe was like,
yeah.
do you work out? Like, what do you eat? And he's like potato chips and Coke.
I think so. Yeah, but he's
Yeah.
basically calling him out, and he's calling Joe Rogan a neo-fascist and saying that RFK is spreading all of this dangerous misinformation. And then Rogan comes back and says, "I'll give you $100,000 to any charity that you want if you do a debate with RFK." And obviously, radio silence because they don't pay as much as Big Pharma. Joe doesn't pay as much as Big Pharma pays. But
Yeah, $100,000 isn't going to make him want to sacrifice his millions that he gets from the pharma.
no, no way, no way. But I found that really interesting, and it's funny because somebody like RFK going on Rogan a few years ago would have been absolutely like nobody would have thought that was going to happen. I mean, maybe on Rogan it's conceptual, but it's coming on Rogan and talking openly about the dangers of vaccines. That's something that up until pretty recently has been a completely taboo subject. If you don't think that vaccines are the greatest miracle of modern science and they save lives and that's all they do, then you're a conspiracy theorist. And then RFK comes on and he tells about some of the dangers of particular vaccines and why it's something we should be talking about more. And they are just slamming him from pillar to post for it now.
Yeah, I have a lot I could say about RFK Jr., but I won't say it all publicly. But he's a good man, and he helped me many years ago at a time when he pretty much in the middle of the pandemic. He helped me when I could do nothing for him in return. So he's a good guy, and I really appreciate him.
Interesting. Do you think that potentially you guys could have a professional link up of some sort in the future?
Well, I was emailing him for a while about doing a video, and because I really strongly supported what he was saying during the pandemic. And he was bringing up things about totalitarianism that I appreciated. And he had some speeches that I liked, and I thought I could maybe animate. And I still go back and I re-listen to them, and I'm like, I wonder if this would be a good animation. But RFK Jr., he's one of those people that was a little bit too controversial that I kind of wanted. Unfortunately, we live in this time where you're guilty by association. So if I have RFK Jr. on my channel, a lot of scientists and doctors aren't going to want to even work with me anymore. It's sad, but that's the culture.
It is, unfortunately, and that's exactly
Yeah.
what I was saying about Alex Jones as well before, is he's the kind of guy, it's like, oh, Alex Jones reacted to your content. You must be a Nazi, basically. So
Yeah.
it's difficult in these times, but now you're definitely seeing RFK, although his interview with Jordan Peterson the other day was taken down off YouTube.
It was.
Yeah, YouTube took it down. Jordan Peterson's been making a bit of noise about that as well. So, I mean, sometimes you feel like things are getting better. You're seeing more open conversations happen, like RFK going on Rogan, for example, and Jordan Peterson. But then you get the censors that come in and all of the supposed experts who are coming in telling them how wrong they are, but won't debate them. So it's crazy times that we live in. And I guess individuals like you and I, we're, you're a bucket in the ocean. I'm a drop at this stage, but I guess we can keep trying to make a difference.
Well, do you think the tide is turning?
Yes, I do. And a year ago, I wouldn't have said this, or a year and a half, 2 years ago, especially during the pandemic. I got to a stage where I was quite pessimistic about it all. And I actually did hosted a global freedom rally during the pandemic where I got.
You in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Yeah, it really was, man. And my friend Andy and I, we did a global free. We had Azubi was the head speaker in one of them, and we had all kinds. We had Dr. Peter McCullough, lawyers and scientists, and I should upload some of that to my channel. But
Wow.
at the height of the pandemic, so like I got to the stage where I was very much in the pessimistic camp, but now I feel like so we're seeing mainstream media die a pretty slow and painful and public death, which is
And
quite
it's beautiful.
satisfying to watch. And we're seeing alternative creators come up and make a real difference. Like Jordan Peterson is absolutely on a tear at the moment, and he's doing amazing work. James Lindsay's another guy who I really appreciate and I look up to. And now we're getting to a stage now where I think that alternative creators are really starting to turn the tide. But the thing that I do worry about is that when that starts to happen, how much do the authoritarians tighten the clamps? And are we going to see more and more and more and more censorship until the logical conclusion of that comes to fruition, which is actual totalitarianism? So that's kind of where I sit at the moment. I'm hopeful, but reluctant.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as you. Maybe about a year or two ago, I would have not had hope, but I really think these independent creators are making a difference. And if you turn on mainstream news, it'll seem like the world's ending. And it's almost like they're trying to manipulate you. That's the only reason to pay attention to the news, is you kind of see the agenda that they're trying to push forward. But then you just talk to regular people on the street like you do, and you kind of get the gist of what the consensus is, with just people using their own logic and using their actual eyes to inform their own worldview, instead of getting it from, instead of being an NPC, basically.
Yes. NPC is one of my favorite terms. What is it? Non-playable
character.
Non-playable character. It's so perfect.
It's such a great one. Yeah.
So perfect. For those of you who don't know, NPC, non-playable character, is like a video game character that's just sort of a part of the simulation and not sentient.
Yeah, like you can have a perfectly fine conversation with somebody, and then you can say a trigger word, and it's like pressing a button on a remote, and they'll just turn into their programmed character.
It's crazy, man. I had a really bad one a few months ago. I was at my friend's beach house, and he had his whole family there. It was great. We're at the dinner table. We're sitting down, talking. And I was talking with one of the girls across the table who's from Venezuela, and we were having a little bit of a conversation about what's happening in Venezuela, and obviously a very interesting country that is. And then my friend's auntie was sitting right next to me, and she started questioning me, saying, "Oh, why do you study these things? How do you know so much about these things?" And I just said, "Oh, I'm just interested in it. There's no real rhyme or reason. I just like to seek knowledge about these sorts of things." And she goes, "Oh, I don't suppose you're one of those Andrew Tate guys?" And then when you have those moments when your finger is hovering above the button, and you're like, "Should I press the button?" And I pressed the button, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I actually really like Andrew Tate. There's some things that he says that I think are," and she just lost it at me. And I'm talking lost it. She was going red in the face. And the whole table stopped what they were doing and had to address the situation. And then I said to her, I shouldn't have said this. It was a mistake. And I said, "Oh, look, I don't want to have this conversation. Clearly, you're getting emotional about this." And I didn't realize she was a really militant feminist. And you can't say to a feminist that you're getting emotional, or else it's done. So I pressed
you can say anything when they're in that state.
Yeah. So I pressed the button, and then I chucked fuel on the fire. But it just goes to show, though, that we're at a stage now, and I'm sure that this has been happening throughout history, where it's very difficult to have conversations with people because, like you said, if you just say the wrong thing, then people have their NPC brains activate and they just turn on you. And it's like they can't be your friend anymore, and they actually hate you for it. So
it takes a long time to of having open conversations with people to find common ground. And the opposite of that is these short sound bites and quick tweets. That's how we communicate now, through the comment section. So it leans towards people getting triggered and emotional, and that's what gets promoted. But I had a roommate over the last few years. In the height of the lockdown, we lived together, and he was extremely progressive, and I lean more conservative, traditional, and we had really strong, heated debates. In the beginning, he would scream at me, yell at me, storm out of the rooms, and it was almost kind of fun to get him pissed off a little bit. But we were stuck in the house together, and we'd have these really intense conversations. And over the course of a few months, we really started to find common ground, and we got along, and we were able to talk about any issue at length. And we still stood on different ideological islands, but those islands came closer and closer together, and we found bridges and bridges. And we really found, like, I probably came more to the center and he probably came a lot more to the center. And we didn't realize how much we were changing each other because we were stuck together talking all the time. He's a really smart guy. And he went back to Seattle where his old friends were, and they're extremely progressive, extremely liberal. And they basically canceled him because he said one thing. He said like one sentence that wasn't to their liking, and they canceled him and kicked him out of their friend group. These are like his old friends. And he came back to me and he was like, I'm like, I think you've changed. Like those were your close, that was your tribe. And just through us talking every single day, we both changed. But that's what it takes, long conversations like podcasts. And maybe that's why people are so attracted to podcasts now. It's kind of ironic because we live in this age where attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. But at the same time, we're listening to like 3-hour podcasts. And why is that? It's because people are working through something together, and it's authentic.
It's interesting. And with this new sort of way that people are consuming media and seeking knowledge, it's almost like you're seeing this collective maturation process happen with people as well. And I think in general, the idea of canceling somebody is not a good idea. People don't like that idea whatsoever. But obviously, there's a very loud minority that are all about that. And I've seen that a lot of times, what you've just said as well, whereby people will have their progressive outlooks, and then they will get slightly red-pilled by someone who's a bit more conservative. They'll go back to their friends and they'll realize how much they're demonized. And then they'll realize, are these people authentic in their views, or is this a club? Is this a cult? And then obviously on the extreme ends of conservatism, that can happen as well. So I personally, I'm thrilled when somebody doesn't agree with me. Like, how fun is it when you can just sit and discuss these ideas in depth? Like, it's just boring if somebody agrees with you about everything. You won't learn anything. And I particularly like it when people are not necessarily like full on lefties. It gets a bit tiresome, but I do enjoy speaking to people who are very spiritual and people who have explored the more spiritual realms, the psychedelics, and spent lots of time in India and those sorts of guys. My one of my best friends, Tom, who I'll introduce you to at some point, he's probably the smartest guy I know. And he's read every single book. He's read every single religious text. He's obsessed with the Bhagavad Gita. Is that the one?
Right.
Yeah. And now he just lives overseas in Egypt and in India and Morocco. And he's always just traveling around to these different places and finds friends and just lives with them for a while. I'm trying to get him to start a YouTube channel. Super cool guy. But the reason why I like him so much is because his perspectives on the world are so different to mine. Because I'm very sort of structured, and I'm very regimented, and I enjoy traditional values and conservative values, and he's just, everything is in flux. And and I find that you're quite interested in those things as well, if I'm not wrong, because some of the videos you've been doing, particularly recently, have suggested that you've got quite an admiration for like your Alan Wattses, guys like that, and the more spiritual realms. So tell me a little bit about that and how that came to be.
Yeah, the spirituality. I think that's kind of where to start, how much context to give. I guess the channel, when I started the channel, I really didn't know what I was doing. It was just at first I was kind of chasing views. I was like, what's popular? How do I make that? I know I want to be a big YouTuber. I don't know if I want to make a science channel or a reactionary channel or a political. After School is a very open-ended name. You can make any type of content. I'm glad I chose a very open-ended name. But at a certain point, I had a paradigm shift, and I was like, stop chasing views, okay? Because you do all this work and you make a video and it doesn't get any views, that's seen as a failure. start making videos for yourself on topics that you're truly interested in, and just for the joy of learning. So explore something that you want to explore, and if it gets no views, you still learn something that you wanted to learn. So after that paradigm shift, I think the channel became a lot more of an authentic expression, and the videos that greatly resonated with me started resonating with people out in the world. And it's kind of like, that's a spiritual lesson in itself. As above, so below. The more you resonate with your inner world, the more you're going to resonate with your outer world. And so, yeah, I've been on this spiritual journey. Psychedelics have been part of that, traveling and trying to uncover these ancient civilization. That's definitely been a mind expander.
Now,
And
I
just
saw
talking,
you also had on the Before School podcast, which is your own podcast. I'm forgetting his name. The guy who had the key to
Immortality Key, Brian
yes, that's right.
Morescu. Yeah,
Yes, that guy is seriously onto something as well.
he's so smart.
What was that conversation like? And do you mind giving the audience a little bit of a sort of blurb about what that book's about?
Yeah, so the Immortality Key is about how we in the West, we're a Greek civilization. We took our entertainment, our academia, our politics, democracy. We've taken everything from Greece except for one thing, their religion. So their religion is shrouded in mystery. And Plato and Socrates and Aristotle all talk about these religious or these spiritual rituals that they would do that were very mysterious, called the Eleusinian Mysteries, where they would drink a brew, and nobody knows what's in that brew, but whatever it was would give them some sort of experience where they had a death experience, and they would have a rebirth, and they would come out of it much more wise. And this was such an important ritual that the Romans inherited it and kept it going with people like Marcus Aurelius. He kept this going. So some of the and their ideas, the Stoic ideas, are still so relevant today. When you read those old philosophies, they just hit you, and they're so wise. So these people were really onto something. So what Brian Morescu does is he takes modern day science and he goes to these old sites and he looks for clues, and he's found some really amazing things. He's found evidence of psychoactive compounds in these sacred sites. One of them being ergot, which it's a fungus that grows on wheat. And when you make beer, this ergot often gets into the beer and can make the beer quite psychedelic. And so the Germans created these rules to make sure that none of this ergot got into the beer. But what happens if you would actually want this ergot in the beer? Well, you could create a very psychedelic potion, which is the basis for LSD. LSD is synthesized ergot. So they could have been drinking some sort of LSD acid brew and having these wild mind-altering experiences. But Christianity came in and kind of wiped out any of that psychedelic mystery history. But Brian's he's uncovering it, and I think he's really onto something. And there is something there. They were drinking some brew, and it was very different than what we think of as beer today.
Yeah, no, I remember him being on Rogan, and I read his book. I read maybe the first few chapters. I need to finish it of his book, and I got to the part where he went. Did he go to Greece? He went to Athens, and when it started speaking to a lady. But yeah, anyways, doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's almost like an Indiana Jones type adventure where he's just going from one place to another and finding all these clues. And he's been going to the Vatican, and the funny thing is the Vatican and the church are kind of open to these ideas. It's not getting a lot of resistance. They're open to maybe there was a lost psychedelic ritual.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be in Italy for the month of July and August. So I'm going to see, maybe Brian Morescu will be over there and I can go tail him.
He is.
Hang out with him.
He's going to be going to Greece in September. He's doing a really big trip with a lot of religious leaders to Eleusis.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking about trying to get out there.
Oh,
in
dude,
September.
well, if you do get out there, let's try and coordinate something because I'm going to be in Europe in September as well. But it's so interesting to hear about these stories and to understand how like the history of religions has come about. And it's something that I've been studying a lot recently, and I've been studying a lot about Christianity in particular. But one of the big problems that I have with it is that I've done DMT, and that once you do, once you enter into that sort of world, you're like, holy shit, there is something going on here that we just don't understand. And I think that there are a few parallels. One of the parallels is this idea of feeling this sort of just unbelievable sense of love and connectedness. I think that the Christians tend to speak about that, especially in the experience of death, and also the people who are more sort of psychedelically spiritual, if you will, speak about that too. And then when you do these psychedelics, there's the feeling is like it's unbelievable. So it throws a spanner in the works when you do these things, because then you get shot into this sort of kaleidoscope of images. I think that Joe Rogan had a great way of explaining it, but I can't remember what it was. But you get shot through this kaleidoscope, and then you feel like you're interacting with some sort of beings. And I remember being in this sort of dark sort of place, and then looking down and feeling like a kilometer below me, there was some sort of like a lava, and there was some dark sort of forces down there, and they were laughing at me and making fun of me, saying, is this really what you wanted? Because I'd been wanting to try this stuff for a long time. And they were like, is this really what you wanted? Is this really what you wanted? And then I was like, yes, yes, it is what I wanted. And then I feel like they give you like little tests from time to time. And I said, yep, this is what I wanted. And then after that, I was shot into this more positive space. So all that to say, people who have never done this will listen to what I've just said and probably either turn the podcast off or think this guy's absolutely nuts. But there is something there, because there's spiritual realms that we can access, if you will, if that's what you want to call it, that are not explainable by science, and they're not something that is widely documented throughout history. And I think that Brian Muraresku is really onto something in that regard. So I guess I'll get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Brian Morescu is taking a very intelligent approach to this whole thing, because he's staying on the side of academia. He's doing this from Harvard and, very well-respected institutions. Instead of kind of going the ancient aliens route, he could do that, where he could go very woo-woo, and he's a very spiritual guy, but he himself has never done psychedelics, which I think adds more credibility to his argument. Because a lot of people say, hey, you've never done psychedelics, you don't know what you're talking about. But on the other side, he doesn't have like a dogma, or, he doesn't have like an angle here. He's looking at the evidence and saying, whoa, I think there's a psychedelic possibility here based on the evidence. It's like people that are really into mushrooms, they want to say that mushrooms are the be all and end all cure to everything. And, I'm a fan of mushrooms, but everything in moderation. It might not be the solution to like your headache,
Yeah, people do get pretty dogmatic. I mean, I've never tried mushrooms myself, but I've heard some good things about it. And people do tend to do microdosing a lot these days. It's becoming quite popular as well. I'm not 100% sure the benefits of it, but I'm sure there would be some.
I haven't really gotten too deep into microdosing. I made a video on like a how-to video a long time ago based on a book. I can't remember the name, but I'm definitely more of a fan of doing the heroic doses like once a year. I feel like I get a lot more out of them. And yeah, psychedelic experiences, in my opinion, should be approached with great respect and reverence.
Yes.
Like I grow my own mushrooms, and it takes a lot of care. Like you're growing those things and you're putting your own love and consciousness into them and nurturing them. And then when you consume them, you know that you're consuming something that you worked hard for and you earned, and you can trust it. You're not just going to like a random parking lot and meeting up with some sketchy person and they're handing you a bag of something. You don't really have a connection. It's almost like if you were to hunt your food versus like if you were to go to Burger King, get your burger. So not everybody has to like grow their own stuff. but I did want to do that just so I could have more of a respect for it. And yeah, every now and then I'll go out into nature and have a good, pretty intense trip, and you can probably see the influence in my art.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like that you said reverence. I think that's a good word when describing it, because a lot of people will go into these and think, oh, it's just going to be a bit of fun. I'm going to see some shapes and colors. But if you have a reverence for it, I think that you can connect to the experience a lot more. And you mentioned a hero's dose. That's Terence McKenna, who's obviously the man when it comes to psychedelics. He coined that phrase, didn't he? Hero's dose.
I believe so.
Yeah. And I think that it's 5 grams of mushrooms.
I think so. I don't really know the exact dosage. I always get it wrong.
Yeah.
So I kind of just do a fistful.
Yeah, right. So when you do the fistful, explain, because I've never done this. Explain the feeling of when it starts to come on. Is it nervous? Is it anxious? Is it?
I think for everybody it'll be different. But the place and setting that you're in is really, really important. So I would always recommend being in nature. If I were to tell, you got to be in nature on a nice day, and in a situation where you don't have to like deal with anything, and you're not going to have people like watching you and judging you. You just want to be out in the middle of nowhere and maybe have like a buddy that is experienced or responsible. But for me, this doesn't have, it's different for everybody. For me, I usually just start laughing a lot, and that laughing turns into almost like a song. And then you start to lay back and have the big geometric shapes come in, and you can close your eyes and really go deep into those. Yeah, I don't want to say too much about it, because like my psychedelic experience, I don't want it to inform anybody else's. So like I've literally taken people out into the forest and tripped with them, and I told one guy, "You're gonna laugh the whole time." He was like, "Is this gonna make me like afraid?" I'm like, "No, you're just gonna laugh the whole time." And my other friend, he was like trying to figure out his life, and I was like, "This is gonna like really give you some answers." And those two guys just had like complete opposite. One guy's just laughing the whole time. The other guy's like figuring out his next life path,
Right.
So, what somebody says to you can greatly if you go into it with intent, that's probably smart too. Like, what do you want to get out of this? And a lot of people go into it just wanting to have a good time, and they probably will. So
yeah, no, it is one that you definitely have to approach with caution and intention as well. Like, if you've got a question to ask, then ask that. But on to the next, man. You've worked with you've collaborated with some incredible individuals, and I'm interested to know who have been the ones that you've like really been like, whoa, like I'm so excited to be collaborating with this person, and how did you get a hold of them?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Jordan Peterson. And I almost want to show you this video. I got one with him coming out in 2 weeks, and he's in the video and he's saying some really nice things about after school.
Awesome.
Which is just, it's like priceless to have Jordan in the video, because I really respect him, and he's been huge for my own personal growth. And, everybody has an opinion about Jordan Peterson, but for me personally, I can say that before I discovered him, I was kind of bitter and confused. And I thought, man, if only the world changed, things might be better for me. But he really made me understand that I have to change. The only thing I can control is changing myself. And you start small and you can expand outward. Pretty
Absolutely.
simple.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Peterson's been enormous for me as well. It's amazing how he sort of came into my life, because I lost my dad when I was 19. And then for the years after that, I was very depressed for like a while, and I started boxing and learned a little bit of discipline. But then I discovered Jordan Peterson, and he was literally like the father figure that I was lacking. And he was like the father figure that I didn't have, and that was meant to be guiding me through my early 20s. And it resonated with me on a level that was just like so unbelievably life-changing. And I introduced him to my brother as well, and now he changed his life. My younger brother loves him. And it's just incredible. Like we went in October, he was in Brisbane in Australia, and he was doing a show, and we all got in our suits and, rocked up and watched him. And yeah, I couldn't speak highly enough of the guy, and the fact that you've got to work with him, that's so cool, man.
Yeah, he's always encouraged me. He's been great, and you're gonna love this next video because he actually does talk about the death of your parent and how to respond to that. And do you want to be part of the heap of people who are devastated and useless when it happens, or do you want to be capable and competent when it does, and prepared? And you can be Simba in Lion King, who runs away and loses himself and turns away from his destiny, or you can be Simba at the end, who figures out his destiny and comes back to Pride Rock. I think in that exact talk he references Lion King quite a bit. But this next video that we're coming out with is one of his most famous ideas about how you need to be dangerous in order to be good. And it's about just why being harmless doesn't make you good at all, and how you need to be a brutal monster in order to be a good, and then learn how to tame that in order to be good.
I've done a video on that. I've done a video on this exact idea. Yeah, I did him and Jocko Willink speaking about the idea of a good man is not a harmless man. A good man is a dangerous man that has that under voluntary control. And that's honestly one of the videos. It's probably my favorite Jordan Peterson clip of all time, because it helped me to understand myself fundamentally in a way that I had never before. Because I always rejected that side of myself, because I've always been quite competitive, and I was a very bad boy growing up in terms of bad student, and never got good grades and was always fighting. And yes, exactly right. I was a bad boy.
Naughty.
And I was always like getting in fights and all this sort of thing. But then I realized, after I heard that this notion from Jordan Peterson to be a dangerous man that has that under voluntary control, that this wasn't a terrible toxic part of my personality. This was just the fact that I hadn't embedded my shadow yet. The fact that I hadn't incorporated that part within myself, and I didn't have that under control. And doing martial arts helped me immensely with that, because I haven't been in a street fight or gone binge drinking too badly for like the last 7 years or so since I started that. So I love that idea. I'm so excited to watch this video.
Yeah, I can't wait to show it to you. Yeah, I think everybody should train martial arts, or at least work out and be capable of handling your own body. And exercise is like my secret weapon. Every single morning I work out as hard as I can. And it's like, I was in the gym today and some guy had a shirt on that I loved. It said, "Pain is weakness leaving the body." And I was about to leave the gym, and then I saw that shirt and I was like, no. Do one more set. Do a burnout set.
That's awesome, dude.
But yeah, that Jordan Peterson, to be a dangerous man, if a bunny rabbit doesn't attack you, it's not a big deal. It's harmless. But if a grizzly bear comes by and the grizzly bear doesn't kill you and maybe like licks your face, you're like, that was a really nice grizzly bear. That was a good bear. So you want to, if you are not capable of handling yourself in the face of cruelty, you're going to be just steamrolled over at some point. You're going to be a victim to anybody who is capable of cruelty if you are not able to be a little bit dangerous.
100%. And I think that's one of the reasons why people really don't like Jordan Peterson as well, because he has a certain way that's incredibly tactful of speaking to young men. And it's something that empowers young men, but it's not empowering young men in the same way that, example, Andrew Tate is empowering young men. Tate is putting a rocket up young men and saying, "You're not this because of this, this, and this." But Jordan Peterson's very tactful about it. And he can speak to a massive, massive array and a multitude of all different kinds of young men and women for that matter as well. But I think the fact that he's so impenetrable, you can't really throw dirt at him, because they've looked through all of the work that he's ever done and they have not found a smoking gun. it's easy to paint a guy like Tate or Trump or the red pill space guys. It's easy to paint them in a certain light. You can't do it with Jordan Peterson because he's a really cool, nice guy. He's a professional. He's got a daughter or a wife. He's worked with women his whole career, and they don't know how to handle him.
He's a great guy. Yeah. Yeah. I really respect him. And there's been quite a few others. This journey has taken me. I've met so many people that I admire. It's one of my favorite parts about being a YouTuber is I just look at my inbox, my email, and I've got Brett Weinstein, Heather Heying, Michael Schellenberger, Jordan Peterson, Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, Brian Marescu, like all these. I'll wake up and I just love to look at my email box because it's just all these people saying, all right, let's get this project going. And yeah, I've always made a note to like try to connect with people I really admire. Just like you, I sent you an email right when I saw a couple of your videos. I was like, hey man, I really love your channel. Just send a little encouragement. But I do like to connect with people that I really respect. And it's surprising how often they'll get back to you. Even if you don't have a big YouTube following, if you emailed like 4 or 5 people you really admire, you're going to get 1 or 2 responses back. And, you know, they're probably not going to take a lot of time for you because they're busy people, but they respond to emails. I found that email is the best way to get in touch with people. If you can find somebody's email, you could email 5 billionaires and you'll probably get a response from one of them and say, if you said, hey, can I get your advice? Should I buy a house in the next year, or where should I, what percentage of my money do you recommend I save? Or, you know, a billionaire will give you a nice little answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that as well. I've emailed a lot of people recently, particularly about the podcast. And I've been pretty surprised by like Zuby responded to me. And like he said to me, I enjoyed this because I emailed him and I was like, I'm starting up this podcast. This is my channel. Would love to eventually get you on. And he emailed me back saying, hey, man, not going to be one of your first guests, but message me back in 8 to 12 months time and I'll see what I can do. And I was like, I like that because you're giving somebody who's a lot smaller than you, the encouragement to say, basically keep working hard and then eventually we'll chat, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think people are genuinely pretty cool, and people who have risen to a certain place like Jordan Peterson and Zuby and guys like that, it's because they understand the principle of reciprocity. But I love checking my emails as well. But I get a lot of people emailing me who are just watchers of the channel. They email me, say, hey, really like this. They give me some criticism sometimes and whatever it is. And unless it's a ridiculous thing, I pretty much get back to everyone. So I do enjoy that. But can you give us any insight into any of the other future videos that you've got coming out or future podcast guests? Or...
Oh man, I got so many. I've got a very controversial one that should ruffle quite a few feathers about sex and gender. It's all biology, but it's going to kind of clarify quite a few things. And that's a topic I wanted to explore for a while now, but it took a while to gather the right information together to really make sense of everything. But that's with Heather Heying. She wrote a book called Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century with Brett Weinstein, her husband. And that chapter is just phenomenal. And the second I read it, I'm like, this is a 10 out of 10 video. So we adapted that chapter, and that's going to be about a 40-minute video. So that's going to take quite a bit of work, but I will pour myself into that like I did that mass psychosis video and put everything into that. That'll be a big one this summer. Hopefully people aren't gendered out by that point.
Yeah.
But I got another one. You know, I kind of revolve between like a controversial video, one that's like spiritual, one that touches on like a current event, something that goes, you know, I'm not going to put out 3 controversial videos in a row. So I'm like, all right, let me, after that one, I'll put out a very tame one. So I have one with a professor at Harvard, Robert Waldinger. He has the #1 TED Talk. I think it's the most viral TED Talk ever. And it's about simply how to have a happy life, but it's based on an 85-year study at Harvard where they followed these men throughout their entire lives, hundreds of men, and they found like basically one common theme that makes you have a happy life. And They've measured all like diet, exercise, finance, everything. And they basically found that loneliness kills. Loneliness is the factor that will determine if you have a good life or not. And if you're not lonely, you'll live way longer, way healthier. And it doesn't really matter if you've had a Harvard education or you're super rich. If you're lonely, that kills. So that's I think that'll be a good video. And then one that's I'm really excited about that I'm hopefully it's so close to being ready to go is with Michael Schellenberger.
Oh yeah.
He's the author of a book called San Francisco. So I'm from San Francisco. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart, but I think it's a global issue too, because culture tends to be greatly affected by what happens in Silicon Valley and especially San Francisco. I start calling it San Francisco now. But I'm from there and I have a lot of emotions and a lot of attachment to where I came from. And I'm really sad and embarrassed and ashamed of where it's gone to. Maybe that's why I lean a little bit more conservative, because I've seen how detrimental these progressive echo chambers can become. That city is just a shell of what it once was. And it had a very meteoric rise because of tech. And so much money came in to that area because of tech. And now a lot of those people have left. And what's left after all that money goes away? Not much of a community. It's not a place for kids, a lot of it. It's not a place where there's any common belief systems or values or principles or morals or common attitudes that hold people together. So I've been thinking about this a lot for years. And I've been paying really close attention to what's happening in San Francisco, but it's happening to a lot of other cities in America where I think they're consumed by nihilism and just the belief that life is meaningless. And that permeates from that point, that permeates into so many different attitudes and the ways you'll approach something. Like if you think life is meaningless, then you think suffering is meaningless and it's something to just get rid of. It's a dreadful thing that's unnecessary. You don't see the meaning in your suffering. Therefore, all the policies are about getting rid of the suffering and ameliorating it. So like if somebody with diabetes is suffering, let's give them cake. That's the policies we're seeing. And you're seeing how damaging they are, because the efforts to stop the suffering is enabling it and causing so much more suffering long term. So I'm sad, and I'm also kind of like, I'm watching from afar. I live in San Diego now, which is a pretty good city. I like it here. It's got some values and some sanity still. It's
interesting how those sort of religious, spiritual ideas permeate on the macro level in societies. And it's almost like when an individual is all about hedonism and all about instant gratification and all about, just as you said, ameliorating suffering, it can be quite detrimental because you don't delay gratification and you don't understand the value in your suffering for your future gain. And it's now like a bit of a penny drop there that the same sort of thing happens with cities, is that all they care about doing is just, people are like suffering, so we just have to just sort of throw all this money at it. And yeah, it long term, it's a terrible idea.
I think we talked about earlier, balance is key. The analogy I like to use is of a wheel. If a wheel is too loose, it's going to wobble out of control. And that's what we're seeing in San Francisco. It's like, it's just a wheel going out of control. The opposite of that is a wheel that's screwed on so tight that it doesn't spin. And that would be a place that has such strong spiritual and moral values that people don't enjoy the present moment at all. They're like the monks that don't eat they eat tasteless food. They don't have sex. They just sit and meditate all their whole life. To me, that's, I appreciate that, but to me, it's a wheel that's screwed on a bit too tight.
Yeah,
Is there
I'd
a
say
balance?
it doesn't sound like too much fun. I mean, I can understand from the Buddhist perspective of the idea of wanting to sort of like remove yourself from all worldly possessions, and then I think that's sort of the idea of nirvana, isn't it? It's removing yourself from all worldly possessions so that you have no attachment, because attachment is suffering, and if you ameliorate that suffering on that grand level, then you can reach this state of nirvana where you're just where you don't experience suffering. So I can understand the concept of it, but
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first one to say that I love temples and
Mm.
going to monasteries, and I just love the art and the architecture and the gardens, how pristine everything is. It's really something to be appreciated.
Yeah.
But you got to live a little. Is there a
Absolutely.
healthy medium between meditating all day and Dan Balzerian? Is there a
Yes.
medium between those two?
Yeah, there has to be. Oh man, I'm so excited to see what you've got coming out. I guess I'm going to let you go now, dude, because I've already taken heaps of your time up. But thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, this was awesome. I knew we'd get along really well, and hopefully you come to California and let me know when you're here.
It looks like October.
October.
Yep.
Okay, I will be here.
Awesome, dude. All right. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.